let's move on to the main event, man. Now this is the big boys, man. This is the big show. Number 5 ranked Alistair Overeem versus Alistair Overeem versus Alexander Volkov, ranked number 6 at heavyweight, man. And listen, we got Drago versus the Demolition Man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure that when casual fans think of Alistair Overeem, they think of just this huge, hook that is just dropping people with his hands all day. But that's not really the reality of the situation. Overeem sets up a lot of his offense out of the tie clinch, using those beautiful knees, kneeing you to the body, using step-in knees to counter your shots. That's actually how he did the boa constrictor, Alexei Oleinik, man. He just brutalized him with knees the entire fights until he dropped him and then just closed the show, right? So being that Volkov is 6'7", right? Dude's an NBA player in the ring, right? And he uses his length and his distance pretty well when he fights. Do you think Overeem will have to walk forward and actually drop bombs to be effective in this fight? Can't really sit back and counter and do all that stuff when you got a dude who could touch you from miles away.
Halfway across the cage.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily as much as he's going to need to push the pressure, push the fight, especially because them being heavyweights, one touch can knock anyone out. And we've seen that Alistair's chin isn't necessarily where it used to be. Now, I do think, since he's been fighting professionally since 1999, he's in the UFC since 2011. You look at young Alistair Overeem fighting in Japan, and he was that tall, long dude using that length. So he knows, and he's seen so many fighters in so many different distances that I don't think it's going to be anything new for him. Now, does he need to maintain that range? I think it's probably going to be good for him to actually get on the inside because, like you said, nobody wants to be taking jabs from halfway across the cage. But I do think Alistair Overeem has the technique and has the grit to get through all of that, whatever Volkov throws at him. What do you think?
Listen, man, I don't know. I think this is yet to be seen. It was something I've been spending a lot of time racking my brain on, man. And the way this fight could play out so many different ways. The fight that we saw from Alexander Volkov in his last fight versus Walt Harris was not what I expected whatsoever. I believe I actually picked Harris to win that fight. And listen, Volkov put on an absolute clinic. And this was one fight removed from Curtis Blades taking him down like 20 times and just demolishing him on the ground. So Volkov, he put a clinic on against Harris, right? What surprised me is he used this really smart pressure, right? So it's like from the jump, it was absolutely clear. This dude was controlling the center of the cage. Harris's back was to the cage the whole entire time, but he wasn't necessarily like closing the distance and going crazy. He was just picking them apart at range, which is what you do when you have the physical tools, skill set that Volkov has. No, he's the John Jones of the heavyweight division. Nobody moves like him or looks like him or as tall as him or none of that stuff, right? Maybe not moves like him. I don't know. That might have been an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. So ultimately, man, if Volkov did that to Harris, who had a 77-inch reach, and Volkov has an 81-inch reach, do you think that he can pick apart Overeem and just leave him back against the cage and control the center of that cage against Overeem, who has an 80-inch reach? I mean, the similarities are there. It's not like it was that much of a difference. And Walt Harris is a monster. So what do you think?
I think Walt Harris is a monster, but a little bit more so that played into that fight was the experience.
Sure.
Walt Harris had a lot of stuff going on in his personal life. Not too many fights. He got thrown into a big name against Volkov and got kicked in the stomach. And like you get hit in the solar plexus, and man, it might take a second or two. But like you alluded to earlier, man, those knees of Overeem are absolutely devastating. Not only did it to the boa constrictor, but he took out Brock Lesnar and Mark Hunt and so many names with just those devastating knees, man, because you get hit in the stomach and it takes you a second or two to go down. Now, can he land those knees without accidentally landing a groin shot on Volkov because he's so tall? Who knows? And I don't know if he'll actually put it into work. But I do think that Volkov doesn't necessarily have the pressure or the skill set to actually make Alistair Overeem go on his back foot. Because Alistair Overeem's fought some serious dogs and some serious people who are looking to get in your face, and they don't mind trading. Whereas I don't think Volkov, and I'll say this right now, open and honestly, I have severely underestimated Volkov for his last 2, maybe even 3 fights. I picked Derek Lewis to win. He won that one barely. He squeaked that one out. He beat Greg Hardy. He lost to Curtis Blades. I've also picked Curtis Blades, but then he beat Walt Harris super bad. I mean, kicked to the solar plexus round 2, and I also picked Walt Harris to win. So I could, again, be underestimating Volkov. But I don't think that he necessarily has what it takes to put Overeem on his back foot. What do you think?
Well, I've been in the same boat. I'll be completely honest as well. Like I said, I picked against him for the I think it was the Curtis Blades and the Walt Harris fight. I just looked at it as this big lumbering dude who is like, he's all right? But he has all the tools to be great. He just hasn't put them together yet. But that last fight changed my mind, man. He got this whole back tattoo. He's like a new evolved version of himself, and I do think that he is taking that stuff into consideration, and he's really trying to like maximize on the momentum that he has right now. Dude's ranked number 6 in the heavyweight division, like he was kind of saying. Like, there ain't too many names ahead of him until you get a title shot. You got Stipe, you got Francis, and then you got just Derek Lewis, a couple other names. It's not like it's the most, like, it's not like lightweight where you got a million killers unranked just because that's how hard it is to move up that rankings. Now, listen, man, if this fight goes to the ground, who has the advantage? And before you answer that, Overeem hasn't registered. He has, I believe, 17 submission wins as opposed to Volkov's 2 submission wins, but Overeem has not registered a submission win since 2009 when he fought in Dream. Not even in the UFC. And Volkov hasn't registered a submission win since 2016 when he was fighting at M1 Global. So neither of these fighters have submission wins in the UFC. And this is another reason. I just want to point this out really quickly. Don't just look at fans, people watching, MMA fans, boxing fans, whatever. Don't just look at a record and think you know what there is to know off of that, man. Like, these records are so deceiving. You got to see what's the level of competition, how much these dudes are padding their records in the beginning of the careers. If you start your career with 10 submissions and you have 40 fights and then you don't have one since then, what does that really say about how great of a submission artist you are? Anyways, who has the advantage on the ground in this bout, AJ?
Now, like you said, who has the advantage on the ground? I don't necessarily know if these guys are both practitioners of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but submission-wise, I think Volkov does, just because he's long, lanky, and if you look at Alistair Overeem, his passion when he hits the ground is to put a hole in your face.
Yep.
He's not, and the only reason he hasn't choked anybody out or submitted anybody is because he's literally looking just to drop bombs while you're on the floor. Because it's a heavyweight division, man. One-touch KOs are left and right. So I give the submission and the technique to Volkov, but I'm going to go the ground and pound and tenacity for Alistair Overeem. But what my question to you, Derek, is both of these fighters have had their chins tested, and I personally think that's where the term I want to use, where the tide turns, basically. Mm-hmm. Will Overeem be able to touch Volkov's chin and put him down, or will Volkov be able to do the same, or which chin is going to hold up longer, and how do you think that plays into the fight, knowing that both of them have been knocked out very recently? I mean, Derek Lewis 3 fights ago dropped Volkov, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik 2 fights ago dropped Overeem. I mean, both, KOs.
So my argument here is that, listen, in the heavyweight division, it doesn't matter how tested your chin is, you will go to sleep. We get hit by one of them big boys. But the real thing, I guess, unless you're Stipe Miocic and you just got an unreal granite chin. But I think, and I'm going to go a physics answer on this one, Alistair Overeem is going to have to punch up at Alexander Volkov. And anytime, if you have any experience, if you've ever sparred your buddies or whatever the case may be, punching up is way harder than punching down, or even punching, you know what I mean? Like, you lose so much leverage and power trying to punch up at somebody. So I think Volkov might be able to weather the storm, man. You know what I mean? And if he could hit him on the ends of his punches with that crazy long reach, I mean, he only has a 1-inch reach advantage. But like I said, the whole his frame is so completely different than Overeem's. I think I'm going to give Volkov the edge, especially because Alistair Overeem, listen, they both have a lot of fights. Volkov has 40 fights. Overeem has like 60 fights. So it's not like a crazy difference. It's a ridiculous amount of fights either way. But listen, so that's what I got on that one. Now, let me ask you this. What would be, in your opinion, the most surprising end to this fight?
Most surprising win to this fight would be Volkov choking out Overeem round 1.
Well, yeah, that would be pretty surprising. I'd say either way, even if Overeem, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. I agree. So listen, Alistair Overeem, he's won 4 of his last fights, via knockout, and he has noted this is his final run at the heavyweight championship. He says if he loses to Alexander Volkov, it's basically done. You're retiring. That's it. Call it quits. He made this really, I don't know the word that I'm trying to use, but he used this really weird standard for listen, I think fighters should be able to fight till age 42, but after 42, you should no longer fight anymore. It's so arbitrary, that cutoff, why 42? He's like, fighters after 42 aren't the same anymore. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if the 42 is the cutoff. I think just once you get that old, you probably shouldn't be fighting, at least not UFC caliber competition. Just like in golf, man, you get old, you go play in the senior league. You're not playing against all the young bucks, man. So maybe we get a senior league for the UFC or something one of these days. But if he loses to Volkov due to a close decision, do you think that Alistair Overeem honors his word and steps away from the game?
If it's a close one, no. I think he'll stay in because he still has a shot to go forward because, like you said, there's only so many people in the top upper echelon of the heavyweight division because it severely drops off after 5 and 6. I mean, I don't have the rankings up right now, but I mean, I know when we were doing them on our own, it's the top is very, very stacked, and then it falters very hard. Now, I still think, let's say he doesn't get it done, and Volkov squeaks one out against Overeem. I do think Overeem still has a lot of fans behind him and a lot of the support behind the UFC just because he, poster-wise and media-wise, is a lot more of a presence than Volkov. Yeah. Let's see if that can change.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think that he honors his word, to be honest with you, man. I think the dude seems like he's at the end of his rope. And because if you lose to Volkov, man, you take a big step back, you know, in terms of like getting that title shot again. You know what I mean? We said it. There's about 5, 6, 7, 8 names that are really, really solid in the heavyweight division. And, you know, getting past those. Just look at how often the heavyweight crown is being put to test. It's so few and far in between. Miocic has been holding on to this thing for a solid minute. Cormier, he retires. And, you know, once if Ngannou wins the championship, I don't know who's taking it away from that, man. So listen, man, let me get your pick and why.
Man, for me personally, I'm going with Overeem, KO, round 2. I think it's going to be a fun, exciting night for him. What do you got?
I'm going Alexander Volkov decision win. Picking him apart at range, staying away from the big blow that puts either one of these guys away. And I think this will be a war, though. I think this will be one of those where it's a standard Alistair Overeem fight. You know what time it is, man. That's why he's the main event. That's why we're excited for this fight. So